the class. This is going to be a little mini video. I've got a couple questions from the homework, and I thought rather than trying to send out an email, to try to help this one student, I'd try making a video and post it for everybody. So, um, if you think this is helpful in the future, you would like me to do this, and you have questions, just let me know. All right, so what we're working on today is at the end of the first 6.2 homework. We have the basic equations homework. There's three homeworks from 6.2. There's basic equations, multi-step, and proportions. And so the specific questions I got were at the end of the basic equations section. So it was 17 and 18 specifically. These are the messier problems from this particular homework, but they're also a good lead into what you'll be seeing in the multi-step equations. So they're definitely worth going over. All right, so my question 17, let me get into, is 3 parentheses 7x minus 4 equals 42. Okay, so let me go over to my document camera. We'll work through that, and then we'll talk about how to put the answer in MyMathLab. All right, so this is 6.2 basic equation homework. This will be number 17, or it's my number 17. Yours will be similar, random number generator, so everybody's numbers will be slightly different here. All right, so since we're solving this, we're trying to get x by itself. Anytime you're trying to solve an equation, before you actually get the variable by itself, start isolating the variable, you need to check both sides, see if there's anything you can do. And so sometimes if you just like visually cover up half the equation. So if you have this 3 times 7x minus 4, what would you do with it? That is just a distribution. So the first thing you're going to do in this equation is do the distribution. So that gives us 21x minus 12 equals 42. Okay. All right, so now once you distribute, now you're back to a basic equation. We're trying to solve for x. This is the only x on the problem. Once you get into the multi-step equations, there will be x's on both sides, and I've got a video for that. But this is we want the x on the left in this case. So that 12 is going to have to move, and the 21 is going to have to move. And as always, we're going to have to divide by 21 at some point, but division should always be your last step. So before we deal with that 21, we're going to move the 12 over. So we're going to add 12 to both sides. That will zero it out or cancel out here on the left. And so we end up with 21x equals 54. And then from there, it's the last step is divide both sides by 21 because we're trying to get 1 in front of the x. And so we get x equals 54 over 21. Okay. All right. So, like I said, once you distribute, it's normal problem solving process, just like the rest of 6.2. Now, for this fraction that's an answer, anytime you have a fraction that's answered, unless a problem starts with decimals, or if it's a word problem where it mentions decimals, don't go to decimals, don't go to mixed numbers. Just can you simplify it? Well, these are both, 21 is odd, so they're not both evens. We can't divide by 2. And then just start going through the process. At this point, I want to remind you that you can use your calculator. So what do we do? 54 over 21. And so that is 18/7. And where did that come from? Well, it turns out that both those can be divided by 3. So 21 divided by 3 is 7, 54 divided by 3 is 18. So that is simplified, and so that is our answer. Okay. All right, so I'm not for sure exactly what the question was. I don't know if there's a distribution part of it at the beginning, or it might have been at the end. Those are probably the two, like the new things in this problem. Now let's go back to MyMathLab and see how we enter the answer. Okay, so when you're looking in MyMathLab on these 6.2 problems, notice that there is an A, the solution set is, and then when you have the curly brackets, that's just a set in math. And so if you have a single number, that's where you're going to put your answer. There's a B, the solution set is, now the way this is read, it's the set X such that X is a real number. Excuse me. That's called set builder notation. We will discuss that in test 2. So, but what that really means, if they're saying X is a real number, that means there's infinite solutions. That means if you have something like X plus 1 equals X plus 1, doesn't matter what X is, it will always work. That is a college algebra level equation. We should not have any equations that have that, that all real numbers. And then for that part C, I don't know if you recognize that symbol or not. That's the empty set or the null set. Again, that's something that we'll discuss in chapter 2 or unit 2, but that means there is no solution. So B and C are sort of special cases for equations. We're not going to deal with those in this class, so ignore B and C. You should always be answering A, and then just put in whatever your answer is. Which for this one I had 18 sevenths. All right. So there's that one. And so now question 18. Right, so this one is 8x minus, and then it has parentheses. So let's go through this one. Go back to the document camera. So this is my number 18 homework. So we're solving 8x minus parentheses 3x minus 14 equals 36. Okay. So again, anytime you have something going on one side or other of your equation, we need to deal with that first. All right, so what do we do with this parentheses? Well, inside parentheses, there's nothing we can do, like on like terms. We're subtracting it. And so when you're subtracting it, there's two ways to think of it. One, I think of it as the opposite. That 8x wasn't there, that would just be the opposite of 3x minus 14. And anytime we do opposite of, it changes the signs on everything on the inside. So that positive 3x is going to be negative 14 is going to become a positive 14. So that's one way to think it's opposite of, or they think this is a distribution problem. That minus sign is the same as minus 1. So now you can distribute a negative 1. So we have 8x. And then that minus 1 times 3 gives me minus 3x. And then negative 1 times a negative 14 gives me plus 14. So again, going from positive to negative, negative to positive. So when you have that negative sign outside a parentheses, and there's no number, all it's doing is changing the signs of both things on the inside. So that's the first step. Okay. Now we still have this 8x minus 3x on the left-hand side. So what do we do with that? Well, if your first instinct is to add 3x to this, to both x's, you have to be careful because the only time you do opposite operations if you're moving it across the equal sign. So if you were moving that minus 3x over to the right-hand side, then you would add 3x to the side, zero it out, and then have your 3x over here. Since they're on the same side, don't do opposite operations. Just do 8x minus 3x. So 8x minus 3x is 5x plus 14. So now we're back to a basic equation. So we had to distribute that negative, change the signs, had to combine like terms, and now we're going to get x on the left, so that's where it is. We're going to subtract 14 from both sides. 5x equal 2, and then it's 5 times x, so we divide both sides by 5. We get x equals 22 fifths. So that's a fraction, so first thing I always do is grab a calculator, do the division. If it's all number, great, but if it's not, don't go to decimals. This can't be simplified because 5 doesn't go to 22. Don't go to mixed numbers. That is your answer. Right. So again, to recap on this one, when you have that negative out front, just distribute the -1, change the signs, however you think of it. But went from +3 to -3, -14 to +14. Probably the most common mistake I see at this point is students will change the sign on the first term, but not change the sign on the second term. So you're not fully distributing. And then again, so when terms are on the same side of an equation, don't do opposite operations, just do whatever the arithmetic says. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. Have a good day.